So let's build the ICM3 Android Auto and Apple Carplay. So you've removed the ICM3 from your car. The first thing you're going to do is flip it upside down, and you will notice that along the edges of this unit there are clips which are holding it together. And what you're going to do is use a tool to basically pry the front from the back. There we go. Once you've done the bottom and the sides, the top will just disconnect and you can flip it back to the correct way up. And then drop the screen down and you will find that there are 3 connectors in here. So what you want to do is disconnect all connectors. Now be very careful with these ribbon cables because they will need to be replaced. You will notice that there is a brown connector on it, and what you do is you lift up the sides of that brown connector and then the ribbon cable will just literally pop out. Don't break these because you need to put the ribbons back in after we've done the install. Sometimes they might need a little bit of help to get up, but again, don't put too much pressure on them because they will snap if you're too heavy-handed. There we go. So now we've separated the front from the back. The next thing that we need to do is remove the PCB from the plastic front here. So the way that we're going to do that is by removing the screws on this board. Just lift the PCB up and you have your plastic front and you have your screen. So the next thing to do is to remove the original screen from the ICM3 because we will no longer be using this. It is held on by these metal tabs along the PCB. So just bend them back carefully. And finally, the screen is powered by these 2 sets of wires which run the fluorescent tubes in the screen. So there's 2 ways to handle this. You can either snip them off or you can desolder them and just remove them. In this demo I am simply going to snip them off. Once you've got this far, the screen will lift off, but it is stuck on with a bit of adhesive and you will notice that it may come into separate parts. So look, here's a glass screen front here, and then you'll have the metal surround, and then you can disconnect the LCD connector which is here. So you just unpick that off and then the ribbon cable will just come out, and then peel the actual screen away from the PCB. Again, there's several parts. There we go. So there is a piece of plastic here. It protects the PCB, and you'll see that it just leaves the adhesive parts remaining. So leave that bit on there. but the rest of the screen is no longer required. So we are just going to put that to one side. So we're going to go back to our front piece, and on the rear side of it is where our screen is going to be placed. So you grab your LCD display and you essentially position it where the screen actually is, like this. Now you may be inclined to centralize the screen inside the window of this ICM3. However, that is not the way to go. You need to make sure that it is at the bottom of the ICM3 and as far to the left as possible. Whilst that means that the screen is not exactly central to the ICM3, it means that you have the maximum amount of space at the top and this side, which is where connectors need to live, and you will need that space. So the idea is to have it all the way to the bottom and to the left as far as you can without letting any light through. So there's two ways that you can stick this in. The first way is the original way, which is with some glue, or alternatively you can use double-sided tape, and in this case I'm going to use double-sided tape because it is the easiest option and it does work. I'm going to stick this essentially on the rim of the ICM3 screen hole. But it's important that you cannot see it on this side. The whole point is that we have a neat install, so avoid any overlap which might be unsightly. Okay, now that you've got the double-sided tape on there, we can peel it back. Okay, there we go. So remember, when placing the screen, it needs to be HDMI port up towards the top of the ICM3 screen, and the screen needs to be as far down and left as possible, whilst also being flat. This is the most fiddly bit. Obviously try to make it straight as well. And you should have something that looks a bit like this. So you see there is a black bar along the top and along this side here, because it's not exactly central, but that's what we need. The next thing we need to do is plug in the touchscreen display USB cable, which is on this side here. And you run the cable up and alongside the monitor so it goes upwards. And that's the screen installed. So we need to put the PCB back on this now, and the best way to do that is to raise up the ICM3, because we need the volume control knobs and control knobs to go through the two holes. On the PCB itself, the transparent plastic surrounds to the knobs need to be facing north on both. If you don't have them, if they're not facing the correct way, this is not going to work. So then drop the PCB down, and you should find that they sit snugly against the screw mounts. If it doesn't, like mine, you can see that this surround for the knob has not fallen into where it should have. There we go. So the only thing that would stop this going in are the surrounds to the knobs, so you just need to make sure that they are lined up, and then it's just a matter of screwing it back up again. And there we go, all screwed back together again. So when you have got this far, you will need to access the HDMI port, which is up here. So the HDMI is in there, see it? And so we're going to plug our HDMI into that, like so. It should end up looking a bit like this. Right, so now that we've done that, we're going to put this to one side. So the next thing that we need to do is undo the 3 screws on this metal box. And then just push the plastic down, and you have separated the metal from the plastic. Now this wire here with the red is actually a high voltage cable, and the safest thing to do is remove this. Now you can't just simply cut it, because that will leave a bunch of high voltage cables sitting around. So what we're going to do is we're just going to open this box and unplug this cable to get rid of it. And the box itself is just held together with these tabs that go all the way around it. So just use a screwdriver to just push those tabs in all the way around. And then just the back ones as well. And then the metal top will just lift off, and that's what you want. And then in here, this is where the cable that we want to remove is. So you literally just pull it up and it will disconnect, and then just thread it through. And there we go. And you've just made it safe. And then just pop the top back on. Right, that's all we're going to do. Now we need to make slight modifications to this plastic piece here. Remember, the yellow part is the top, and the HDMI cable that we've cut out is actually too high for this to go back on. So what you need to do is see where that HDMI cable comes out, because we're going to be making a cut in the plastic. And it doesn't need to be very far back. I'm just going to leave some marks. It needs to be for the actual PCB of the HDMI cable, and just leave yourself some room on each side to get it through. And the other thing that you will need to do is cut a hole in the back here, so that you can get thread the HDMI cable through. So you just cut out the center part for 2 of these holes, and that will be sufficient. I find that a Dremel is best for this. So what you've done is you've cut a small hole in the top there. So just make sure there's no molten plastic around the top, so that it's nice and flush. And that's what we want. We've made a little gap in it now. So let's go back and sort this out. So now that you've made some cuts to your unit and they're nice and smooth, we're going to put the silver box back in. So again, remembering the yellows to the top, and the Saab label is on the top of this. Just slide it in place like so and pop the screws back in. Now the HDMI cable and the USB cable go through the newly created hole in the plastic. And then once you've done that, you need to connect up the two ribbon cables that we disconnected earlier. Now the brown connectors need to be lifted up carefully on both sides. You can push the ribbon cable in nice and easily until the silver contacts have disappeared or are barely visible, and then you can push down the brown connectors and that will lock the ribbon in place like that. And then do the same again for this one here on this side. Okay, now that we've connected the ribbons up, everything's back together again. So now what you need to do is hook the bottom of the ICM faceplate into place, and then push the top in so it all clips into place, and you should hear a healthy click, and that means that it is clipped in place. And what you're going to notice is that the HDMI that we installed is just here, slightly protruding through, but it shouldn't be enough to cause any issue. It should essentially be flush with the top of the unit so that you can't see it. If it is sticking out too far, it's not the end of the world, because what you can do is just take a little bit off of the bottom of your vents. But we've established what we wanted to do at this point, which was to get both the power and touchscreen wire and the video wire out of the ICM3 unit so that we can plug it into our Raspberry Pi. So grab your Raspberry Pi and connect the micro HDMI adapter to your HDMI cable and plug this into the second port. There's two HDMI micro ports on this, and you want to plug it into the second one carefully, like so. Next comes the sound card, which plugs into any of the USB ports. Next comes the Bluetooth adapter. That goes into any of the USB ports. The microphone, which you will put on your A-pillar or where your rear view mirror, plugs into the pink part of your sound card. And the auxiliary wire, which plugs into the EHU in your car, goes into the green part of the sound card. Then the USB that comes from the ICM3 goes into one of the remaining USB ports. Now if you have the Apple Carplay kit, there is an additional step, which is to install the CarLink adapter, and this needs to go into the only remaining port on the Raspberry Pi. So we're going to plug that in there. And finally, the USB ports, which you have connected to the back of your cigarette lighter, will be used to power the Raspberry Pi. So you plug in the USB into the USB ports, and you plug the other side into the USB-C connector next to the HDMI on the Raspberry Pi. And when you turn your ignition on, you will see that the Raspberry Pi starts to flash and your screen will turn on. And you will see that Apple CarPlay will start if you have your iPhone connected via Bluetooth. And it's as simple as that. The additional bits and pieces that you have here can all just be dropped inside your Saab 9.3's dashboard in the gap behind where the ICM unit is pushed through.